Hello, and welcome to the Santaland podcast. I created it just for you. I'm your host, Tony Felice. In each episode, I'll read to you for 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about what we just heard. Like the cricket in my story, I'll guide you through a grown-up fairy tale, one that explores ideas of existence, identity, and the soul's journey through trauma, and the transformative power of love. By the end, you'll have heard my whole story, a sneak peek into the creative process of bringing a book to life. Maybe we'll read other books together. But for now, follow the wise cricket and discover the Santaland within yourself, a place of hope, connection, and peace that's already inside of you. This podcast is especially made for those like me who feel a little different and maybe talk about math at weddings or philosophy at funerals. And like me, maybe you have a loving husband, or a wife, or somebody else that loves you. If not, we're here to love you, because you're in good company, my dear friends, here in Santaland. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Santaland. I am very happy that you're here, and I hope you'll stick around after the reading to get a little bit of insight on the creative process and what I was thinking. But let's begin. We're on to chapter 16, entitled David Out of Sorts. Look through our portal. Yes, it's possible to do two things simultaneously. Keep up. At the same time Tom was disposing of old calendar pages, David was outside with his head in a bush, which may as well have been a cloud when it came to David and hydrangeas. He crouched along the hedge border of the main house, pulling weeds around them. They were lined in chatty rows along the foundation. Nestled among them boxwoods, colorful leafy plants, more flowers, and around everything, a neatly manicured lawn. A branch tangled in his hair. He brushed it away. David felt the soil between his fingers, studying its texture. He inhaled and closed his eyes. It smelled like California. Sunshine, rosemary, and that peachy smell of boxwood, and also roots and earth and worms. Boy, was it pretty. The landscape David created lifted the house on a leafy pedestal. Lights at night made the house glow with amber light and interesting shadows. Next to David, the only other man David trusted with plants was in the middle of repotting flowers under the ledges. "Eduardo," David said, "look at this." David rubbed his fingers together and offered them to Eduardo to sniff. "It's good, David, it's good," he said, accented by the sound of ancestors in his voice. The house, a large Cape Cod, was David's favorite achievement, inside and out. The scene was photographable. Sunlight found David's head as he stood and he talked to the workers, tending to the living things around them, joking with each other, and feeling a sense of brotherhood in soil, friendships over weeds and such. Surrounding the house was a handful of cottages, the barn, office, and, surprisingly, a line of washing stretched between buildings, with the rest of Northern California in the distance. David smiled, but not about the earth, about secrets. But not the kind you go bragging about, just, irony and all. David grew flowers and trucked them into town at 6 a.m. to Claire's little store. I went with him once out of curiosity. I was mindful to stay out of sight when traveling with flowers. With dirt under his nails and within 2 hours of sunrise, he would be selling the flowers to ladies in fur coats and diamonds. They asked their questions and made their demands, never knowing that he was one of them. He liked it that way. They thought he was a town local, dirty fingers, scraping by. And they acted like it. He laughed, though. Tom's influence had made David a voyeur and a stealer of sentences. So he'd go down there and play the act of homespun local, just so he could listen to them cluck on and on. It provided him the opportunity to steal juicy turns of phrases, and sometimes they'd even surprise him and be lovely ladies, cooing and flirting. "They don't know who he is," said Claire to Tom in the past. "It's hilarious. and he loves it. It gives us something to do in the afternoon, sit around and do the Lord's work, making fun of those people. Like Tom, anonymity was good for David, and sliding under the radar after so many years of flying high was a good change of pace. David didn't have to do those things. David didn't have to do a lot of the things that David did, but the world was better because of it. He cared for people. He wanted them to be happy. In a sense, he restored Tom's faith until Tom could do it himself. As Tom curated sentences, David curated experiences. Like flowers carefully chosen, planted and nurtured, David chose experiences carefully, only investing his energy into things that had purpose and could grow. 30 years as an architect had seen David build many beautiful things. The two of them complemented each other the way people who just seem to match do. The same cadence, the same easy nature, the same quest for things that mean something, the same sense of humor, and many of the same tastes. Hard to come by for any couple. Lucky for them. The first thing I noticed about David when I arrived was his smile. The kind that brings light to a room, and not just from toothpaste. From what's inside. I knew he was the right person for Tom, and boy did I chirp when they were around. Fortunately, David reminded Tom long ago that crickets are lucky, and so I never felt any real danger, especially since David did not believe in pesticides. Only nature. But I digress. David noticed the sun had been baking his neck. He forgot sunscreen, so he gathered the stems in his arms, gave Eduardo instructions for the main garden, and headed toward Tom. He crossed the expanse of sunlit garden and stepped across the flagstones. Mindful of entering Tom's creative space, David tried to do it quietly, but instead he stumbled into the barn noisily. I almost chirped as a warning, but held fast. "Sorry," he said. His big work boots caught on the threshold, and he almost lost hold of his bundle. His arms were covered in mud, extending to the elbow. In his hands, a selection of daisies and hydrangeas. "Wow, is it humid today?" David said, after stomping his feet. He moved into the space quietly, as if searching for a pew near the back. "These should look nice in the house. I'll put some here for you." Tom barely noticed, but turned and looked at David. "Hello, hun. You look nice and rugged." I scrambled to the edge of the bookcase to get a better look myself. David stopped for a moment to be admired. He felt the flush of exhibitionism. To be seen by Tom that way had meaning for David that was nestled into the small region of his frontal cortex. He stood there for a second, seeing himself in Tom's eyes. Whenever the wolf appears, the moon will be out, he thought. In fact, just last night, David had pointed out the full moon, casually gesturing over his shoulder as he sat on the piano at the patio at the back of the house, facing the ocean. The moon rose at 1 o'clock on Tom's visual dial, just over David's left ear. David gestured again. "Look!" Tom jumped off the couch, seeing something else next to the moon. "My God, look at that!" Tom exclaimed, and he rushed to the hill. The moon was in the process of leaving its door ajar, casting a ribbon of light across the watery surface in flickering diamonds, covering hundreds of miles, deceiving the eyes yet again. The horizon line so bright and so far away, they could see the Earth's curvature. Perspective is everything. Tom had noticed Prussian blue clouds to the left, which had formed the rather perfect face of a wolf. Jaws open, ready to devour the moon. Tom turned to grab his phone. "Never mind the phone, hurry!" David waved him over and pointed to the scene above. "Let's just take pictures with our eyes, okay? Come." He gestured again for Tom to join him at his side. Tom took up the natural position to his left where he always stood. Tom gasped, "Look!" David stood close to Tom, and they watched it eat the moon, quietly. Prophecy in the shape of a cloud. I tapped into David's thoughts. A few years back, Tom and David visited Santa Fe, and while they were browsing shops on the market square, an old Navajo woman who did not look up from what she was doing said to Tom, "You are the wolf. You devour your life like the wolf." That was it. That was the end of her pronouncement. At the time, Tom just shrugged and said, okay, finding the statement strange and out of place. But the memory of it lingered for years, and he and David talked about it many times since then. A year later, Tom had the only tattoo he ever got, a wolf on his bicep, a snarling thing that reminded him not to be the angry wolf, the mean one. And now, 30 years later, they watched a cloud wolf open its jaws and eat the moon. She told you that right before we got married, said David. Mm-hmm, said Tom. David put his arm around Tom. This is a special moment, isn't it? What do you think it means? Asked David after a time. Tom replied, I'm sure we'll find out soon, hun. We just have to trust. Okay, that is the end of that chapter. A couple of things. First of all, I'm going to play, you know what? I'm going to play this just so you can see how crazy I can be. I'm going to play this part right here that's a recording from August of 2024. So at that point, I was about 8 months into editing and refining the book. And I'm going nuts because about the whole idea of sentences and words, and there's a reason why. So I'm going to play that right now, so stand by. Purpose. That's why I'm here. This is my purpose, is to make sure that good words, we have to be so careful of the words that we speak. Because each word is manifested into something, and we have to be careful about what we manifest. And that's why wishing is so powerful. Ask and it is received. Ask and it is given. So we're on a wave, and we must stay positive and forward and focused. We must put only good words out into the world and true ideas of love out into the world, because on a quantum level, they are infinite creations. Okay, so where does that come from? Well, first of all, I was working on this math equation because I was trying to figure out why the world works the way it is and why my mom had to die tragically, why the horrible things that happened to me in my life have happened to me in my life. And so you can tell through my grief, there are periods of time where I'm incredibly creative. And I feel as if it's almost my mom speaking to me, or that I've tapped into some frequency where all these other successful writers are coming to me and having ideas that they want to share, and I'm hearing them. And so there's that. There's also the fact that I am neurodivergent, and that day I lost my temper. Somebody was behaving very, very poorly outside, and instead of apologizing, they were very mean in their response, completely unexpected. And I was very troubled by that, and I said some things that I wish I hadn't said. But you can't take them back. You can't take those words back. And here I am thinking about this idea of infinity and the fact that an idea it happens in that space between what is known and unknown. Remember that, holding your two palms together? That's where ideas come from. You know, it's about the people who are standing in the known having the ability to reach into the unknown and find answers. And so that's what I'm struggling with. And the connection to the words, and where I say the light, stay in the light, is because, or on a wave, that comes from the double light experiment. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of water. The double light experiment, a wall, you have a wall, and there's two slits in the wall, and there's another wall beyond that. The idea is if you shine light through that, light is a wave and a particle, so the wave forms a wave pattern when it's split, so the top wave gets canceled out and the bottom wave gets canceled out in a pattern, and what appears on the wall is a pattern of light, almost like a zebra pattern or a bell curve, which is even more mind-blowing, going in a bell curve, right? So going from small to big to small, the lines. Now, If you shoot individual photons through those same slits in the wall, eventually those random hits of the photon hitting the wall will develop the same pattern. So an individual is behaving the same as a wave, which means to suggest that we are particles having a wave experience the same way light is a particle having a wave experience, but those two things behave differently under given circumstances. And in fact, as if I understand the science correctly, and you can Google this, they behave, the photons behave, they behave differently under observation or by being filmed than when they're not. And the more you repeat the experiment, the faster it happens. Almost as if it's precognitive. Like the scientist says this is where it's got to go, and that's where it goes. It's like it follows. Well, friends, everything is made of light. You are both agency and energy energy has agency. We talked about that in the last episode. You know, it's as above, so below. So I started to feel like there was a quantumness, when something exists, it always exists, even if it's only in the thought of a person. That's pretty powerful stuff. It's like a snapshot of every, it can't be a snapshot, but every like little video of a memory, which is interspersed with other memories and feelings and emotions. Is a complex thing being a human being. So imagine good words and phrases being the building blocks like DNA or amino acids, right? DNA is also the building block of life. And so what if that's what it is? That sentences or words or thoughts are the beginning of life. A thought in my head is caused, as I understand the science, and you guys can email me and tell me I'm wrong, sodium, potassium running along the myelin sheath, they switch places. They jump from maybe underneath to the top, and the other one from the top to the underneath. And as they do, a spark is created, and that's a spark in your brain. That's a neuron firing. Okay, so physical things made of DNA and also atoms and energy are colliding together to create a spark of energy that you transmute using your agency. I am matter. That's pretty wild stuff. I wrote another book that I haven't published yet. That's a science fiction book for kids. But this one came first. The words came first. And so thank you for sticking around. I don't know what our time stamp is here. I'll look right now. We're at 16 minutes. So was there anything else I want to say? Well, other than the fact that David, the introduction of David and him being out of sorts is a clue for something that comes later. So the title of this chapter, most of the title chapters are Easter eggs, if you haven't figured that out yet. And I've broken the book down so that each chapter, so to speak, is just very small. You can read it like I do in 10 minutes. And each one of them has a point to it, I hope you find. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love for you to tell me WTF or this doesn't make any sense or I loved it. I received a wonderful, received some wonderful feedback today from somebody who's read half the book, and I was thrilled because as an artist, I second guess myself. I question myself all the time. You don't know how many times I've questioned myself in the shower about whether or not this was a dumb idea to talk to you. Was this a silly idea to try to bring my book out this way? And would I offend anybody or would I be foolish? And I've decided it doesn't matter, because the idea is to create something and do something with it. It's not about doing something to be, the next star. Some people do that, and that's their motivation, and they can be quite successful at that. And that's a whole different trajectory. Nothing wrong with it, but it's not mine. I want the sentences to be so good that when they're strung together, more than one point is made, and some of it is between the lines, like a Rubik's Cube, if you will. So, anyway, that's all I have to say about this chapter. Wasn't that fun? We get to meet David for the first time and his smile. Better than toothpaste. I think that was a hilarious line from the cricket. Well, folks, from me to you, I hope that you find your own Santa land this evening or during the day, whenever you're listening to this, and that you find some joy and some happiness. And maybe you find the same thing with the characters. Thanks again for joining us. Take care. Until next time.